Let's bring in three colleagues now from the Parliamentary Press Gallery. Susan Delacourt's a columnist with the Toronto Star. Joël-Denis Bellavance is the Parliamentary Bureau Chief for La Presse. And Catherine Lévesque is a parliamentary reporter for the National Post. Good to see you all. Thanks for being with me today. Susan, look, we're expecting a federal budget within the next few weeks. How has the war in Ukraine and Canada's response and everything around that changed the conversation, do you think, inside the government over budget priorities?
Well, I think it's changed it outside the government, too. It's got now, we saw Anita Anand, I think, sort of negotiating on the outside of cabinet about why she needed more money for defense and to bring it up to Canada's NATO contribution up to 2%. I got the impression from the way her cabinet colleagues have been responding in interviews over the last week or so that has not been formally presented to cabinet. It may be tomorrow, but I think that that we're seeing that there's an argument that the world has changed forever because of this invasion, and therefore Canada's budget has to change forever. So I hope the budget wasn't at the printers already, because I think it's still being written.
Joël-Denis, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I agree. I think we're going to see the main theme of this budget will be military spending, and that will go a long way in trying to secure equipment that the National Defense the Department needs. Also, I think what we need to do is also, at the same time, reform our procurement policies, because we may have the money, but sometimes it's very slow in acquiring the equipment. It may take like 2 decades in some instances to buy the equipment we need. Like just think about the replacement of the CF-18. We're still looking for the planes. Two companies are still, considered for this change. But clearly, I think what we have right now around the table, the cabinet table, is a majority of hawks. They want to see increase in spending for the military, and that we're going to see that in the next federal budget.
And Catherine, let me ask you, the country's facing spiraling inflation, housing costs out of reach for many young people in particular. Will there be a challenge of trying to sell Canadians on more money for defense, or has Ukraine changed, perhaps exposed a whole new reality that Canadians have to come to terms with?
I think the Liberals right now have too many priorities. I mean, we've seen all these campaign promises about housing, about the environment, and now comes this war in Ukraine and the invasion of Russia. But certainly, I think what we've been hearing from Canadians hasn't always been the case, certainly in the past few years, is a need for more investment in defense. I think the government now will have the support of a majority of Canadians, to increase our defense spending, because right now, I mean, the situation is ridiculous. We have very old planes, we have very old equipment. I mean, we've been trying to help Ukraine in however ways we can, but it's limited right now, and we obviously have to spend more money from now on for spending. But obviously, we won't see the results right away.
Right, Susan. Let me talk about the CP rail stoppage now. Once again, Canadian business leaders, a lot of them are down in Washington as we speak, trying to reopen the lines of communication after the pandemic, and here they are finding themselves defending the reliability once again of Canada's supply chain to some American legislators. How long do you think the government can go before it ends this?
Not long. I saw, like you did, I'm sure, the head of the Auto Parts Manufacturers Union, he said that within an hour of arriving in Washington today, that he had heard 4 times about the rail strike and that it had to end soon. Certainly you heard in question period, it was the majority of questions. So I think the pressure will be on the government to end this quickly. This is the worst timing for something like this. We just don't need any more disruptions in the supply chain, no matter which side of the strike you're on. Yeah. Or it's not. I guess it's the NDP is careful to say this is a lockout. Right.
There were lots of indications that there was trouble getting a deal in the past number of weeks, Joël-Denis. Is the government slow to react to this? And give me your thoughts on how quickly do you think Seamus O'Regan has to, bring an end to it? Oh, okay. Sorry, Joël-Denis frozen. So, look, Catherine, let me jump to you and ask you to answer that same question here in terms of timing for the government bringing an end to this work stoppage.
It has to be as soon as possible. I mean, I think Minister O'Regan was very clear in the sense that he is not leaving Calgary, as long as this is not resolved, as long as there's not a resolution. I think all parties are right now at the negotiating table, which is a good sign. But at the same time, I mean, our reputation is on the line here. I mean, the Americans have had, talked to Canada and said, well, what happened with the trucker convoy? That certainly caused a lot of supply chain issues. I think we can't afford to have another conflict that will make us seen as a less reliable partner now. So Seamus O'Regan has no choice but to stay there until this is resolved, hopefully in a matter of hours or days.
Yeah. Susan, let me shift our focus now to the Conservative leadership race. Two more candidates on the weekend, two MPs, Mark Dalton from BC, Scott Aitchison from Ontario. And then I thought some interesting news as well. Michelle Rempel-Garner joining the Patrick Brown campaign as national campaign co-chair. What kind of a message do you think that sends? And is that a big get for Patrick Brown?
I think it is. I think it's a very big get. I think the assumption had been that Pierre Poilievre had that, the base of the Conservative Party wrapped up and in his hands. And Michelle Rempel represents a large part of that Western base. She's very popular. And the fact that she's gone to Patrick Brown instead of Pierre Poilievre tells us this race is getting even more interesting than it was already.
Joël-Denis, Michelle Rempel-Garner going to the Patrick Brown campaign, but then within a matter, it's hard to follow how quickly other camps respond to these news flashes from candidates and so on, but already getting assailed by Jenny Byrne from the Pierre Poilievre campaign saying, hey, look at Patrick Brown's record, allegations against him of sexual harassment in Ontario. What are you doing going to Patrick Brown? But tell me about that and Michelle Rempel going instead to Patrick Brown's camp and instead of to the Poilievre camp.
Well, as Susan just mentioned, the fact that Michelle Rempel chose Patrick Brown brings a lot of interesting dynamics to this race. But one thing that the Pierre Poilievre camp has to watch is that they're attacking everybody. So they run the risk of making sure that nobody will vote for Mr. Poilievre on the second round. It's a proportional ballot, so you have to make friends at some time in this race. If you attack the main other candidacies, you may not find yourself having enough support. So you may hit the ceiling of 45% on the first ballot, but find no support on the second ballot that will prevent you from winning this race. So Mr. Poilievre right now, his camp cannot pretend to be the candidate of unity within this race.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, Catherine, you see that you've got Jean Charest, Patrick Brown, Scott Aitchison from Central Canada, all talking about unity, all talking about the need to tone down some of the rhetoric and to unify Conservatives and to unify Canadians. And then you see the tactics of the Poilievre campaign. What do you make of that?
Well, I wouldn't say it's just coming from the Poilievre campaign. I mean, Patrick Brown is absolutely responding to these attacks, and he's actually going on the offensive as well. He released his platform for Western Canada. Even in there, he had some attacks towards Pierre Poilievre. So I think it's really interesting because just a few days ago, or even 2 weeks ago, Pierre Poilievre was attacking Jean Charest. Now he's focused all his attention to Patrick Brown. So I think it kind of talks to that strategy that, those possible talks between the Brown and Charest campaigns, whereas to look, is Jean Charest going to be try to look as the unifier, going to be like, look, I'm not going to respond to these attacks. Instead, what we're seeing right now are direct attacks between the Brown and Poilievre campaigns. And it's kind of interesting because especially that they served under the Harper government, they were sitting together. They were actually colleagues for many years. So I think most of the action, if you will be between those two campaigns. And but unfortunately, we've seen a lot of nastiness in the past few days.
All right, and the campaign's just getting underway. Lots of weeks to come. We'll see if that theme holds true. Thank you all for your time tonight. Take care. We'll talk again.
Thanks.
Thank you.